Howdy my totally as always Tubular gamers. We're back with, you guessed it, another video, and I got a fun topic for you. Today we're going to be talking about divisive video games. You know those games that just nobody can agree on. Everyone's got something to say. Everyone's got an opinion about these games.
You know exactly those games that I'm talking about, where it feels like there is no general consensus for the game. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people think it's just whatever, and others are just sick of all the people arguing about it. These games really are perpetually debated. That's what I call a divisive video game. I'm sure we've all played a divisive game at some point and have had our own opinion about it. So for today's video, I got 15 of the most divisive video games ever that I've played at least. I'll be taking a quick look at each of these games and why they are so divisive, and of course sharing my own opinion, as I always do. This list is in no particular order, and it's just some games that I've seen people debating about literally from the moment they released all the way up until now. I really think that at this point, people are just going to be divided on these games really forever. And so with that, I encourage everybody to share their opinion down below, not just on these games, but maybe some divisive games that they've played at some point in their lives. I'd love to know how everyone's feeling.
But you know what's hopefully not as divisive? Supporting the channel. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon and the super thanks. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. Seriously, if you even made it to this part of the video, you rule, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Let's get on to the list.
Now for me personally, when I think of the most divisive video games, what comes to my mind immediately is always going to be Deadly Premonition. I remember when this game came out, people were all over the place with this game. And it wasn't just normal gamers like you and I. Even the critics couldn't come to a general consensus. They couldn't make heads or tails of this game, and all these years later, this game is still incredibly divisive. It really feels like it's just one of those games that nobody can come to a general agreement on. Everybody who's played it has something different to say about it. Why was it so divisive though? Well, the game is a horror game and stars our main man York investigating some murders, but this game just goes off the rails. The story, the characters, the general atmosphere and vibe is so weird and wacky and straight up unhinged that there's really never been another game like it. Not even Deadly Premonition 2 is like this when it comes to the story or the vibe. The vibe is just all over the place. While the game tries to be scary and tense, at times it just throws in this jazz music, or the infamous whistling theme that just has no place in a horror game. They're really good catchy ass tunes that I frequently use in my videos, but why are they in a horror game, in such a serious dark game? Who knows, but it's pretty funny nonetheless. The game is also extremely campy with plenty of unserious moments, and some people really hated that. They wanted a serious horror game, and plenty of people went, man, this is so weird and just different from everything else that I've ever played. The game has become a cult classic for a reason. Outside of the strange premise and just wacky characters, we do have the gameplay, which is just as divisive as the rest of the game. When it comes to the gameplay, it tries to be a third-person shooter survival horror game with an open world, survival mechanics, and it even has a little bit of Shenmue in there where all of the characters follow a schedule. And yeah, that's pretty ambitious, especially for a game like this, and to be honest, the gameplay just doesn't really work a lot of the time. It was just overly ambitious for this kind of game. The shooting feels terrible, the survival mechanics are really half-baked, the game just is straight up not scary, at least to me. The open world is incredibly dull, the characters aren't really able to follow their schedule a lot of the time because they just kind of glitch out and get stuck on the environment. It certainly was an ambitious game. Does it work all that well? No. And then we have the presentation, which is just objectively bad. The game is very ugly, with some terrible filters and a rotten frame rate. Seriously, the frame rate is just horrible in this game. Oftentimes it feels like you're running in almost single digits, and nothing crazy is even going on either. The game just really struggles to run, and so you wonder, like, why do people like this game? Well, it's for the same reason people like really bad movies. Sometimes it's so bad that it's good. Sometimes you really just can't look away, and you're able to overlook a bunch of the issues because at the end of the day, what was this? It was entertaining, and that's what video games are supposed to be, entertaining. I can see that this game is just full of issues. Like I said, the gameplay is just generally half-baked, and the presentation legit is just terrible. The story at times feels nonsensical and it's all over the place, but I could not look away once I started playing this game. I only wanted to play Deadly Premonition. It just was able to hook me and it kept me wildly entertained. It really just did a full 180 where it was so bad that it genuinely became good. I love the music, I love the campy, weird atmosphere and off-putting characters. The gameplay, yeah, it's pretty shit honestly, but I'm able to overlook it and its horrible frame rate. But damn it, I was so into this game, it hooked me so deep it's not even funny. Could I even recommend Deadly Premonition? I mean, maybe. It's not exactly an easy sell. The gameplay sucks, the presentation's horrible, and the story's all over the place, but like, that's kind of also the appeal. It's just a really peculiar case in gaming. There's never been a game like it since. Not even the sequel. The sequel is not able to straddle the "it's so bad it's good" line. It really just kind of falls into the bad category, and I can at the very least say that I don't recommend the sequel. But the original, yeah, I think people are going to be divided on this one forever. Now, another game that came to mind pretty quick when thinking about divisive video games is Star Fox Zero. From the moment this game released, people have been just very mixed on it. And I mean, with good reason. I think Star Fox Zero is like the definition of a mixed bag. Star Fox in general is a mixed bag. While 64 is amazing and one of the best games for the 64, it feels like no other Star Fox game has ever even been close to attaining that game's success. And this game, yeah, it definitely didn't do that. While it tried to be more of a return to form for the series, dropping a bunch of the BS that had shown up in the prior games in favor of, just shooting everything on sight, the game still managed to divide people, and really it was all due to one thing: the controls. The controls in this game are just so radically different from legit any other video game ever made that it just turned a ton of people off. I know plenty of people that got this game and just went, no, I hate the controls, I hate how it feels, I don't even really want to get into the game, the controls just ruin it. And that's totally valid. This game just has such a weird control scheme where you gotta balance the Wii U gamepad but also looking at the TV, and it just leads to a really uncomfortable, strange experience. Like, yes, if you play it for a while and really put some time into it, you can get used to these controls and they can even feel nice, but most people just tried this for a bit and went, yeah, no, this is not for me. I was like that the first time I played this game. I just went, what is these controls? I just want to use a controller like the good old days. No, you have to use the Wii U gamepad and also be looking at the TV, but also the gamepad at the same time, and yeah, it's just a constant back and forth, and while it does seem very unconventional, you can get it to work, and this game can be enjoyable with the controls, but I know most people didn't even give that a chance. And can you really blame them? They should have just included a traditional control scheme as well. Outside of the controls, the rest of the game was also a mixed bag. While it does have plenty of moments and parts where you're like, yes, this is Star Fox, this is great and it's fun, there are plenty of missions and moments in this game where I was just like, yeah, this isn't so great. Like, why were there stealth missions in a Star Fox game? These just felt incredibly out of place, and even people who like them could agree that, yeah, they probably shouldn't have been in the game. While there are plenty of enjoyable levels, there are some where it just feels like they're really repeating Star Fox 64, and the game at times, in my opinion, it feels like it doesn't have much of its own identity. This game, along with pretty much the entire series, just kinda lives in 64's shadow, and that's just my opinion on it. A lot of people felt different ways about this. Some people said this was the worst Star Fox game of them all because the controls are so bad, and some people think that this is like the best Star Fox game outside of 64, and it was a really great return to form. People have just been pretty mixed on this one. I really lean into the camp of not thinking this is a great game, but I know there are plenty of people that disagree with that. And that's why it's on today's list. I've seen just a lot of differing opinions on this one, and I think people are going to generally disagree on it for a very long time. If the game ever gets re-released on Switch or the Switch successor and they just drop the stupid control scheme, I think we'll be able to have a much more fair analysis of this game, and it probably would become less divisive. But at the moment, people seem relatively mixed on this one. So another game that came to mind pretty quick while I was making this list is Death Stranding. Really, from the moment this game started getting shown off, people have just been relatively mixed on this one. And after it came out, there was a lot of people that liked it, but there was a lot of people that also really disliked it. It's clearly not a game for everybody, and it certainly divided people, which is ironic considering the theme and story of this game, but won't be spoiling anything here. So why were people so mixed on this one? Well, people really liked Death Stranding for having such an interesting, different different story. The presentation is fantastic. Sam's really cool, and the game is just really out there. There's really no other type of game like it. But at the same time, people didn't like it since it was so unconventional and it didn't really fit into any boxes. There's no other games that play anything like Death Stranding. Sure, there have been some other games to pop up that have similar enough features, but they don't really play like Death Stranding. A lot of people also didn't like the story. They thought it was confusing, nonsensical, they didn't care for the characters and their goofy ass names, and thought it took just way too long to get its point across. And then we have the gameplay, which is easily the most divisive aspect of Death Stranding. This game is, as Kojima called it, a Strand-like, where a lot of the game is just trying to get from point A to B. You're delivering shit. You're the Amazon delivery driver. Sometimes you're on foot. Most of the time you're in a vehicle though, and yeah, this gameplay didn't resonate with everybody. A lot of people thought it was boring as hell, walking forward slowly, trying to keep your balance, or driving a big truck or bike around just wasn't a good time. They wanted more action, they wanted more gameplay, or at the very least that gameplay to be more exciting. While there are some exciting moments that show up, like some stealth sections and some combat, it's all very basic. A majority of the gameplay really is just delivering shit, and traversal is the main gameplay mechanic, and yeah, a lot of people just didn't jive with that. Some people really liked how chill it was and just how much of a, again, different experience it was. But I have seen plenty of people over the years go, oh, Death Stranding is so boring. The gameplay is just not it. I can't understand how people like just traveling and moving shit around. And then there's me. I liked the game. I actually liked how chill it was to travel. I like how different and out of the box it is. And it was just such a unique experience, and the story was just so crazy. The game has tons of great moments. I thoroughly enjoyed Death Stranding. I know that there are a good amount of people that feel a somewhat similar way to how I just described my feelings about the game, but there are plenty of people that think this game sucks and we really shouldn't be getting another one. But at the end of the day, it's just one of those games that is always going to divide people. I'm really excited for the sequel, and I can't wait to see what is next for this series. So for this entry, I don't have one particular game, rather an entire series, and that is the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. Now, when it comes to most divisive video game franchises, not just one game in particular, I don't know if it gets much more divisive than Sonic. I have heard just wildly different opinions about nearly every single Sonic the Hedgehog game, from that original game all the way back on the Genesis to even the current games. People are just seemingly never in agreement, it feels like, when it comes to this series. I personally like almost all of the games, but yeah, there's certainly some Sonic games I don't care for. But I know there are a lot of people who don't care for literally any Sonic game. They think the 2D ones suck, they think the level design sucks, they think Sonic only got worse and worse in 3D, they don't like him as a character, they don't like any of his stupid friends. Every aspect of Sonic sucks to somebody, it feels like. But at the same time, there are people who feel the exact opposite. They love Sonic and all of his fun, friendly characters. They love the level design. They love going really fast, whether it's in 2D or 3D. There's plenty to like. The one thing that most people can agree on is that the music in just about every Sonic game is really good. They never really mess that up. Except in Sonic Chronicles, they really did screw the pooch on that one. When it comes to divisive Sonic games, while some are clearly more divisive than others, it feels like just about every Sonic game is divisive. And it also feels like opinions sway back and forth all the time with some of these games. Growing up, people love the adventure games. I couldn't find like anybody talking shit about the adventure games. But nowadays, oh, there are so many people that say the adventure games are awful and some of the worst 3D Sonic games. And I'm just like, what happened? It feels like everyone's opinion on this series and games in particular is just kind of always shifting. I can at least speak for myself and say that, yeah, my opinion has shifted a bunch on these games. Throughout the years, my opinions have changed on really almost every Sonic game. I used to be not that big of a fan of Unleashed, but nowadays, Unleashed is one of my favorite 3D Sonic games. I used to really hate the Werehog sections and wasn't even huge on some of the daytime stages. Nowadays, oh yeah, I think the daytime stages are great. There's so many good spectacles, and the Werehog stuff, it's pretty tolerable. It's a decent enough little beat 'em up. I don't know if it really belongs in a Sonic game, but it wasn't awful, especially when compared to some of the other Sonic games. Yeah, it really just feels like Sonic is all over the place, and you'll find people coming out of the woodwork to say whether they love a certain Sonic game or they really hate a certain Sonic game, or it's the entire franchise. We could really be here all day talking about just the most divisive Sonic games. I could literally do a video on just divisive Sonic the Hedgehog video games, because the quality of these video games and really opinions on these video games have just been so all over the place for the last, I don't know, 20 plus years that People are just never going to be able to agree on this franchise. We can agree he's blue, right? Well, I can't even agree with you on that one. I'm colorblind. He looks kind of purple to me. I'm just starting shit at this point. Let's just move on. So don't worry, I've got some pretty current games on this list as well. And here we have Starfield. Now, from the moment this game dropped back in 2023, it feels like everybody's had something to say about this one. Even in like my own personal friend group, opinions have been all over the place. A few of my friends, they really liked it. They put 50, 60 hours into it. And a few of my other friends put like 10 hours in and said this sucks. And while that obviously is a very small bubble, I think that's decently representative to how people feel about Starfield as a whole. Some people really did enjoy this. They thought it was the next amazing big open world RPG by Bethesda. They fell in love with the characters and the world, and they loved just exploring all around and doing as much as they could. And a lot of people played the game and went, yeah, this isn't for me. I don't like the characters, I don't like the world, I don't like how empty everything feels, I don't like the space setting, and I think just about all of Bethesda's other RPGs are better. Which category do I fall under? Well, sadly, I kind of fall into the latter. While I do like the characters and the story, I unfortunately don't really care much for the world. I don't care for how empty this game feels. I don't like the space travel, really like any of the space mechanics actually, which is very unfortunate. And I really just found myself yearning for how Bethesda open world RPGs used to be, where you just kind of go off into a direction, find random shit, and stuff happens. Whether it was new characters or weird side quests or a bunch of deadly enemies show up and you gotta just take them out, I much prefer that gameplay style versus what Starfield has. Starfield though does have plenty of good things. I think the game looks pretty decent. The ship customization is actually really great, and there are some little nuggets here and there where the questing is good and the characters have their moments. I will say though, I really did not care for that main quest of Starfield, and I don't think a lot of people did either. There were some people though that I know who have put a ton of time into this game. They put well over 100 hours. They just got really immersed into the world and characters. They tried to do as much as possible, but there's a bunch of people also that put in 5-6 hours and just went, I'm not getting hooked immediately. And I can't really blame them. Starfield is one of those games where I think the worst part of the game really is like the first few hours of the game. Shoot, it might even be the first like 10 hours of the game, and that really sucks because most games you want to get hooked as soon as possible. Starfield, in my opinion, it's not one of those games, and I know there are plenty of haters that don't like it because of all the loading screens and how it feels like it's definitely a bit behind the times. There are a lot of divisive aspects to Starfield, and the game's only around a year old now, so they are updating it, they're adding new things, there's new DLC and all of that, and so it's still a work in progress. We'll have to come back to this one. Maybe in the future people will be less divided on it. We'll have to see, but as it currently stands, yeah, people seem to be rather divided on this one. And so here we have another game that's probably the least divisive game on this entire list, but is still divisive nonetheless, and that's The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. I know a lot of people really do love this game, but there's always been a good amount of people that just never really cared for this game, really from the moment it came out. Some people really like this game because it takes a somewhat different approach to a typical Legend of Zelda game. They like the dungeons, they like the art style. A lot of people really do like the motion control gimmicks that showed up here. And the soundtrack is pretty good overall, but there's a lot of people that really didn't like this game because they were just kind of burnt out on 3D Zelda games. They were sick of this formula. This game felt a little too traditional. They didn't care for the story or the characters. They thought the game graphically wasn't all that impressive. And then I know a lot of people really did not like the Wii Motion Plus gimmick that this game had, where it had the new Wii remote that uses the Motion Plus, and a lot of people just wanted, a video game to control normally. It's not as dividing as Star Fox Zero's controls. That might be like the most divisive controls like ever, but a lot of people just didn't want Wii Motion Plus. They didn't want motion controls for their new Legend of Zelda game, and the game was re-released like a decade later with normal controls, so you very much can play this with, just a regular old controller, and all the Wii Motion Plus stuff is on the right analog stick, and that's how I played the game. I actually just really was not interested in this game when it came out. I was like, yeah, I'm kind of done with my Wii. I really don't want any more motion control stuff. Like, I'm gonna go play Xbox or PS3, and that's what I did for a long time. But when Skyward Sword was re-released as the HD version, I went back and played it, and my honest opinion of it is that, yeah, it is pretty good. I think it holds up incredibly well. The controls are actually very nice. The game looks graphically good. It's got a decent little story. I would say that it's a solid 3D Zelda game. The tutorial does take a very long time, though. I will say in Fee, I don't think she's annoying, but I don't exactly love her either. I don't think that this game should be as divisive as it is. It seems like a pretty quality game, like through and through. Nowadays, I don't really see many people divided on it, but especially back when it came out, oh yeah, there was a lot of people torn on this one. I would still say that out of all the 3D Zelda games, it is the weakest still. But at the same time, we're talking about the 3D Zelda games, some of the greatest games of all time. So I mean, the weakest one of those is still probably a really great game. I still think it is, and I think all of this game's haters should really give it a second chance. The Switch version particularly, where, you know, they get rid of all the gimmicks and motion controls. So the next entry for this list is not one game in particular, it really is an entire franchise, and I have the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. Now, FNAF has been divisive really since that original game. I remember when it came out 10 plus years ago, there were a ton of people that loved it and were really into it and the lore and the jump scares and thought it was truly a terrifying game, but there was a bunch of people that went, I don't get it, this is stupid, this doesn't look scary, the lore's dumb, and it looks like it's just a jump scare simulator, why don't you go play some real horror games? And as the series has continued on, that divisiveness has really never gone away. I'd say really every FNAF has been divisive to a certain extent, some more than others. I'd say the most divisive one probably still is that original game. That's where a lot of people determined whether or not they were going to like this series, but they kept making more and more, and at this point, I think most people have their mind made up whether or not they like this series. Some people really do love this series because they like the characters, the character design, they do think they're scary games. They have interesting lore and the gameplay is decent, but a ton of people really don't like the FNAF games because they think, yeah, they're just jump scare simulators, they're not real horror, they don't provide any tension, it's just cheap pops, and then it's just these stupid animatronics clearly aimed for children. How could anybody truly think this game is scary? Well, when it comes to my personal opinion, I fall onto the former category. I do like the FNAF series, I think these games are scary, they have interesting lore, and the gameplay is pretty decent in most of them. Horror is obviously very subjective. What you find scary, I might not find scary, and vice versa, but a lot of people really do not find the Five Nights at Freddy's games scary, interesting, or even good, but there are plenty of people that really do love this series to death. I know obviously this series is very popular with the kids, but there are plenty of adults that like this series as well. There was even the movie, and the movie, it was actually pretty good also. FNAF still is divisive, but I feel like really at this point in time, 10 plus years later, I think most people have just made up their mind whether or not they want to like this series or even give a shit about it, but I'll always be a fan. So here's a game I've talked about several times on the channel, especially recently, and that is The Last of Us Part 2. Where to even begin with this one? You probably already know why this game is as divisive as it is. It's easily one of the most divisive video games ever made. The critics absolutely loved it, but when it came to the players, oh yeah, it was all over the place. Some people really do love this game. This is one of their favorite games of all time. They think it's better than the first game, and they think it's just a masterpiece. But there are a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, that really think this game is trash, that the story sucks, the pacing is awful, the gameplay, it isn't all that. We can at least all agree that the game looks very good though. Like graphically and from a production standpoint, this game is absolutely incredible. I won't deny that, but when it comes to the story, it is very, very divisive. I'm not going to get into specifics here. I'm just going to say that this game was very dividing when it came to the story and its characters and the direction it took. When it comes to the pacing, many loved how it was just this long, epic journey, and plenty of people were like me and thought it went on just a little too long. When it comes to the gameplay, while I personally enjoy the gameplay, I know there's a lot of people that were just like, this is basically the same as the first game, except it's now extended out and it's just kind of basic and shallow, and you know, that could be a fair point. I'm not going to say I completely agree with that, but I could see why some people would think that. We could be here all day talking about why this game is as divisive as it is, from every single plot point to every single character to every single part of the game. Genuinely, we could be here arguing and debating about it. But at the end of the day, say what you will about it, it got people talking. I mean, a lot of people are still talking about it. I just did that overrated games list and I put Last of Us Part 2 in it, and man, the comments have been going off for days now. People still are talking about this game like crazy. It doesn't really matter what year it's going to be. I think people are just going to be debating and going back and forth about this game for eternity at this point. And so when it comes to The Last of Us Part 2, all I recommend is that you play it for yourself and form your own opinion. Don't just parrot off of other YouTubers or content creators or what you read online. Really play it for yourself and get your own opinion. If you don't like it, you don't like it, but actually giving it a shot is the best answer in my opinion. It's a divisive game and it's always going to be one. And so here we have BioShock Infinite. Now, I don't see a ton of people going back and forth these days about this one, but for quite a long time, this game was a hot topic for debate. A lot of people really were picking up what this game was putting down, but it felt like there was almost an equal amount of people that really did not like BioShock Infinite, particularly the ending. I think before the ending, this game was pretty well regarded, but the ending certainly left people talking. Outside of the ending, I think most people did enjoy the gameplay. While they didn't like the 2-weapon limit, they could still agree that the gunplay was decent, the level design was alright, there was some cool fights and set pieces in there, and for the most part, it was a pretty enjoyable first-person shooter. I don't know if most people enjoyed it as much as, say, the original BioShock or thought it was as innovative, but I think for the most part, people did enjoy the gameplay, at least based off the circles and discussions I've seen. The gameplay is one of the more well-regarded parts of this game. When it came to the story and the setting, that's really where all the Division showed up. Not just with the ending, but with the characters, with the setting, how it's portrayed, the main character. Really, it feels like every single aspect of the story has been criticized at some point. Some people don't like the ending because it kind of makes up its own rules. Some people think it's a really good twist. Some people don't like the main character or Elizabeth. Some people really do love these characters and think they're incredibly fleshed out. Same goes for the entire setting. I personally quite like BioShock Infinite. I think the gameplay is pretty good. I think the story is very good. And the ending, while it is very shocking and not what I expected, I mean, I still thought it was a decent enough twist. Do I like it as much as the other BioShock games? No, not really, but I still think it is a good game. Hopefully sooner than later I'll actually rank all of the BioShock games. People have been asking me for ages, but I feel like this is going to be one of those games that's always somewhat divisive, especially if you played it way back when it came out. I mean, if you played it then, you probably remember just how divisive the game truly was, but nowadays it seems to have quieted down just a bit when it comes to the discussions on this one. So for this entry, I actually got a double header, a double creature feature as I like to call them. I have Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. Now I know we already talked about Starfield, but it very much is worth bringing up Fallout 4 and 76 when it comes to divisive games. The Fallout series in general is incredibly divisive, but I don't have the whole series on here because New Vegas is just kind of beloved by everybody. When it comes to the most divisive games in the series, it's definitely Fallout 4 and 76. There are a lot of people that played the original few Fallout games and just don't care for how Bethesda has treated this series from 2008 and onwards. A lot of people played the originals and think that's how Fallout should always be, and not necessarily when it comes to the gameplay, but when it comes to the themes, the story, the writing, etc. And Fallout 3, 4, 76, yeah, they definitely changed things up and it is different from the older ones, but Fallout 4 in particular seemed like a bit of a turning point for the series, at least when it comes to the divisiveness. There was a lot of people that played this and went, wow, New Vegas is way better, the older Fallouts are better, this game's barely even an RPG, it's not a real Fallout game, there's no karma system, this is just an awful RPG that shouldn't even be played. But on the flip side, there's quite a lot of people that really think the opposite. They think it's a great RPG with excellent characters, great world design, exploration, etc., you name it. And then when Fallout 76 came out, yeah, it was pretty unanimously negative, but over the years, especially over the last year or so with the Fallout TV show, I feel like this game has become a lot more divisive. There is actually a lot of people that really do like 76. And originally when I was making this list, it was going to just be Fallout 4, but Fallout 76, yeah, there's a lot of people that really do actually like it nowadays, and that one I'm never going to understand. I played 76 back way long ago, thought it was awful, played it a year or two ago and thought, yeah, it's not awful anymore, but it's still not a good game and it has tons and tons of issues, but yeah, there's a lot of people that have put a ton of time into it and really do enjoy it. That's not me personally, though. And then to quickly jump back to Fallout 4, I personally do love Fallout 4. It's one of my favorite Fallouts. It's one of my favorite RPGs of all time. While it isn't perfect and it does have plenty of issues and it is totally lacking in certain RPG aspects compared to other Fallout games, I still really enjoy it. I love the world exploration and the characters. The companions are so good in this game. But of course, there's always going to be the people who prefer how the older Fallouts did things, and there's always going to be the people whispering in your ear that New Vegas is better than all of them. Well, you can enjoy Fallout 4 and 76 to an extent, as long as somebody's not always whispering in your ear that New Vegas is better. And I think continuing forward, the series will really continue to be as divisive as ever, with plenty of fellas, loving the old way and plenty of people loving the new way. Either way, I'll be there. I really hope we get something Fallout soon, man. I don't want to play stupid 76. And so here we got a pretty recent game. We have Final Fantasy 16. Now, almost the entire Final Fantasy series is incredibly divisive. I'd say there's only a few games in there that really are universally loved and hated, and Final Fantasy 16 is not one of those games. I could have included several Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy 10, 12, 13, 15, and 16, but yeah, I'm sticking with 16 because in my experiences, it doesn't get much more divisive than 16. Fellas seem to feel really strong about this one. Some people absolutely love this game. They love Clive, they love his story, they love the gameplay, the action combat, the world, the presentation, the boss fights, the music. People do love, like, every aspect of this game, but I have seen a lot of people, not just regular people, but even a lot of influencers and even some critics that just did not care for this game. They think it's too linear, they don't like the gameplay, they don't care for Clive and his story. The boss fights, while they are an amazing spectacle, don't offer much substance. I feel like people have been debating nearly every aspect about this game since it came out, outside of the presentation. We can all agree that, yeah, graphically the game does look pretty incredible, and the music is pretty incredible as well. I don't think you're going to find anyone denying that, but when it comes to the gameplay in particular, that really seems to be the hot topic with this game. A lot of people just don't like that it's become much more of an action RPG, and at times it doesn't even feel like an action RPG, it just feels like a character action game, and it even had combat designers from other hack and slash games, so yeah, that's absolutely why it does feel more in line with Devil May Cry than some of the other Final Fantasy games. A lot of people don't like the structure of the game either, where it's not an open world game, it's much more linear. It's not as linear as like FF13, but it's generally pretty linear, and then the character and the story, I mean, yeah, not everybody's gonna love Clive and his epic journey. But how do I feel? Oh, I love this game. I really actually loved Final Fantasy 16. I love Clive. He's one of my favorite protagonists in the series now. He is just such a good story. Yeah, I'm not huge on the ending either, but generally speaking, I think the story is really good. And the gameplay, I thought it was actually pretty good. While it is very different from the other Final Fantasies, different isn't always bad, and Final Fantasy has always tried to do something different, and the important thing is that even though it's different, it's still good. I think the combat is good, I love the presentation, the boss fights in particular were a huge highlight, and the game really had me hooked start to finish. But I know there were a lot of people that absolutely felt the opposite way. They didn't like Clive, they didn't like the gameplay, they thought it was just too big of a departure for the series, and they don't want it to be this hack and slash action RPG. They want it to go back to the menus, or they want something more along the lines of like Final Fantasy X. And yeah, it doesn't seem like Final Fantasy is going back the traditional route. But then again, Final Fantasy has really almost never been traditional. It feels like from like Final Fantasy VI onwards, every single game's tried to do its own thing, and so for Final Fantasy 17, I'm sure it'll do something crazy too. I think when it comes down to FF16, it's going to really come down to the type of gamer you are. If you prefer much more traditional, maybe menu-based battle systems and RPGs, then yeah, you might not like this one, but if you like action games, if you're okay with it being a little bit more of a hack and slash, and you like Clive and his story, I think you're going to like this one. I think everyone should check it out to really form their own opinion, and the game has recently been released on PC, so more and more people can try it now. So for this next entry, I have not just one game, but an entire series, and that is the Call of Duty franchise at large. When it comes to some of the biggest games released over the last, 10-20 years, Call of Duty is near the top of that list, from a sales perspective, and I guess memory space as well. Seriously, 300 gigabytes for some of these CODs, what the fuck? Anyway, with a series like COD being as popular as it is, people naturally are going to be pretty divided on it. I wouldn't say it's polarizing, but yeah, people have been divided on the COD franchise for almost 20 years now. Of course, there's a very strong, passionate, hardcore community of people who have been playing COD for as long as they can remember, and that's all they want to play. But there are tons upon tons of people who are sick of these games, sick of the gameplay, sick of the formula, sick of like every single aspect of Call of Duty. And unless you're just getting into video games, we're certainly at a point where I feel like everybody has their mind made up about Call of Duty. They either like it, they really like it, they don't care about it, or they don't like it. And I'm sure most folk usually switch between a few of those. I used to be really into Call of Duty, especially in the 360 days. Then I got, kinda into Call of Duty. And then I've just kind of fallen into the I don't really care what COD is doing field, and that's where I've been for the last several years. And who knows, maybe in the future I'll get really into COD again. It doesn't seem likely at this point. Maybe if I was working on Call of Duty at Activision, wink wink, I'd be more interested. Either way, I would say COD, yeah, it's rather divisive, and I'd say every single game is divisive to a certain extent. Some are clearly, though, much more divisive than others. Like, when it comes to the fan favorites in the community, there's a few most people can agree on that are pretty good. The old Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, and of course the legendary Modern Warfare. But then there's some of the ones that, most people can't seem to agree on. Call of Duty World War 2, Black Ops 4, the new Modern Warfare. And shoot, even just Warzone, like as a concept, has had people divided literally since day one. And Call of Duty, despite all the division, is still selling like crazy, so they must be doing something right. But yeah, at this point, everyone's got their mind made up as to how they feel about this series. And so here we got an older title. We have Silent Hill 4. Now, when it comes to the Silent Hill franchise at large, people are rather divisive about it. Obviously, when it comes to Silent Hill 1, 2, and 3, a majority of people absolutely love these games. They are the fan favorites. It's what made Silent Hill popular to begin with. I mean, how could you really not like Silent Hill 1, 2, and 3? But after that, I would say legit every Silent Hill game is divisive to a certain extent. Some people very much dislike everything after Silent Hill 3, and then there are some people that are more open to the games after Silent Hill 3. I'd say the most divisive game of them all, though, is Silent Hill 4. While the game was still developed by Team Silent, and it still has a lot of the things that made the older Silent Hill games as great as they are, it took a very, very different approach from legit any of the other Silent Hill games, and there's never been a Silent Hill game that's anything like The Room. And I mean, for that alone, yes, it is very unique and individualized, and it absolutely has its own identity, but when it comes to actually playing the game, it's pretty up and down for most people, it seems. A lot of people, even a lot of Silent Hill fans, just did not care for this game. They didn't like the main character or the story, the themes this game has. The other characters aren't exactly the most well-liked. A fair amount of people don't care for the room, the whole concept of the room, the fact that you're stuck in this room a majority of the game. And really that it's got just a completely different vibe from the first three games. The first three games had you running around, in Silent Hill, foggy ass town. This game, you really aren't doing that. Sure, you go to other places outside of your apartment, but for the most part, you really aren't in the town of Silent Hill. It's just a very different kind of experience, and not everybody was open to that one. I will say more people were open to Silent Hill 4 though than later Silent Hill games. Games like Silent Hill Downpour or Homecoming aren't really all that divisive, they're just more disliked than anything else. But how do I feel about Silent Hill 4? Well, I think the game is good. Not great, but good. It has a very different vibe and atmosphere from the other Silent Hills, but I can dig it. I like that it's different. The main character, yeah, not too big on him or the other characters, but it's fine. And as for the gameplay, I think it's pretty cool how you're in the room. I like that you become very familiar with his apartment, and the gameplay outside of that, yeah, it's decent enough. I think Silent Hill 4, while it is quite different from other SH games, is still an enjoyable game that you should try if you like Silent Hill. There's a very good chance that I think you'll like it. Some people don't, some people do. It is what it is. Well, Silent Hill 4 isn't the only fourth game in a series on this list. Here we have Halo 4. Now, over the years, I feel like this game has become less and less divisive, especially after Halo 5 and then Halo Infinite being just so up and down. But when it came out, Halo 4 was very divisive. People seemed to feel two different ways about it. A lot of people actually really did enjoy Halo 4. They thought the multiplayer was fun. The campaign, while it wasn't as good as prior Halos, yeah, people thought the campaign was fun, and there really was good fun to be had with Halo 4, but I remember a lot of people immediately dropped the hate on this one and were like, no, this game sucks, it's nothing like Halo, the shooting and speed of it is just completely whack, loadouts suck, seriously, what is going on with the loadouts? This isn't COD, this is Halo, you're supposed to be able to find the weapons on the map, and all these years later, yeah, that debate still is going on. I'm sure there are plenty of people who are like, why are you even talking about Halo 4 at this point? Well, Halo 4 was re-released for that Master Chief Collection, and yeah, it was almost the same thing again. where people were like, oh yeah, the multiplayer's fun, the campaign's pretty cool, there's some fun weapons, and the gunplay's decent, but plenty of people really had the exact opposite reaction. They said ADSing is not Halo, sprinting isn't Halo, the game's speed is just completely thrown off, and this isn't the Halo I know and love. And there's a lot of people that really believe after Reach that Halo's just kind of been shit. And while I will agree Halo has never even come close to reaching the highs that it had in like the 360 era, I wouldn't say it's total shit. In terms of how I feel about Halo 4, I think it's fine. I think it's a decent to good first-person shooter, but yeah, it's not Reach, it's not Halo 1, 2, or 3, it's not even really ODST. But I still would say at the end of the day, Halo 4 is a good game. I think it's more divisive than other Halo games because I feel like a majority of people just dislike Halo 5 and Infinite versus 4, where there still was some hope for the franchise and there still is some fun to be had here. But yeah, I think we can all agree that it was a step back for Halo, and we've just never really recovered from this point on. It's a decade later, and I feel like Halo still just isn't where it should be. Alright, and so for the last entry on today's list, I've got Pokemon Gen 8 and 9. If you don't know which Pokemon games that is, I'm specifically talking about Pokemon Sword and Shield, and then Scarlet and Violet. Now, Pokemon as a franchise has become rather divisive over the last, I'd say, 10 to 15 years, and there is a common meme that goes around saying that, you know, nobody hates Pokemon more than Pokemon fans, but I feel like these two generations in particular really have been far more divisive than any other of the series. But despite all that, these games have sold like crazy. Like, they have done just crazy numbers. Pokemon really is the most successful media franchise, like, of all time. It's pretty ridiculous. So at this point, like Call of Duty, you probably already got your mind made up about Pokemon. Maybe you really just prefer the old games. Maybe you do like these new games. Everybody's gonna already have a certain mindset for it. But when it comes to Scarlet and Violet and then Sword and Shield, I feel like people were pretty on the fence about this one. They could go either way. I personally have never cared for Sword and Shield, but then I like Scarlet and Violet. But I've met plenty of people that really actually feel the exact opposite. They thought Sword and Shield was good, then Scarlet and Violet was a mess, and then there's of course people that just think both are a mess. And of course I've talked to and met plenty of people that love all of them. There's like no Pokemon game that they dislike. People are just generally all over the place. When it comes to Sword and Shield, people really divided on the overall design and then the game's performance. The game looks terrible and it doesn't run all that well either in the wild area. And then when it comes to Scarlet and Violet, yeah, it's pretty much the exact same thing. People don't care for its design, they don't like how open it is, and the performance is absolutely atrocious. And you know what? Yeah, objectively speaking, the performance is terrible. The graphics are not good, especially considering how much money this franchise makes, and it certainly should be better. But I can see that there are improvements made to the overall Pokemon formula. I like that it's more open and that you get to do the gyms in whatever way you want. Sure, the gyms don't have a bunch of traditional battles like they've always had, and they've got some stupid mini games in here, but yeah, I kind of like them. I like that you can go in whatever order you want. You can go face one of the harder gyms immediately and make the game actually somewhat challenging. In Sword and Shield, man, I just did not like most aspects of this game. I didn't like the level design, I didn't like how simplistic everything was, and the wild area just felt wildly underdeveloped. And then Scarlet and Violet fully realized that. Either way, it feels like most aspects of both of these generations were rather contentious, from the Pokemon themselves, to the designs, to the game design, to the areas being laid out, to the structure and the story, and of course the presentation. Yeah, people were just kind of all over the place, and I feel like going forward, Pokemon is still going to be all over the place. At this point, it feels like not even some Pokemon fans know what they want. What do I want? Man, I just want another Pokemon Legends. That game was actually pretty good, and we're getting another Legends, so I'm really excited for that one. Either way, that's really it for this video. I have talked enough about divisive video games. If you take a shot or a drink every time I say the word divisive or some people, you'd be fucking dead like 8 minutes into the video. I realize that my vocabulary might not be the most robust, but I wanted to talk about some divisive games, and yeah, hope you all enjoyed it.
And that's it for today's video. Hopefully it was entertaining. Hopefully it was what you were looking for. Maybe you agreed, disagreed. I'm sure down below I'm going to hear all about it. But if you're going to comment down below and you made it to this part of the video, comment our secret code word, bread. Because I need some bread right now. It's getting real hot up here. But that's it for today's video. Stay safe, y'all. Bye-bye.